So, welcome to Confounded TV. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Jerry Brennan, who is the CEO, founder, and 100% owner of cloudbooking.com. Welcome, Jerry.
Thanks, Alistair. Good to see you.
And you. And you're going through some exciting times. So I think that maybe we should start off with, what is cloud booking? Where did you start?
Wow. Okay. So the company's been around a long time. As you know, you and I have talked a lot about this business over the years. But we started almost 20 years ago somehow, and essentially my background was kind of electronics back then, and what I wanted to do was get into a business where we wouldn't only ever be as good as our last sale.
Yeah.
So I went out to companies and said, what kind of processes do you have in your business that involve lots of people and don't work that we could try and automate? And everybody said, oh, booking a meeting room, it's a disaster. So I'm thinking, right, well, let's have a go at that. So I then kind of came up with the idea of building a system to kind of put the onus on the user. And the original part that we built for the Bank of Scotland up in Chester was a solution that was to manage the ordering of hospitality for meetings. And the first client we got kind of owed £1 million to their caterers.
That's amazing.
It's crazy because the guys would ring down to the catering office. There'd be a person who barely knew how to use a computer, who was trying to enter this data into an Excel spreadsheet. In I don't know what would that be, Windows 95, I guess. and they go, cost center, 11, and make it up. So the data was entered twice. The cost centers were all wrong. There was no audit trail, so it was a disaster. So we just flipped it around and said to the users, right, come onto this portal. If you don't put the correct cost center in that matches with the cost center we've got for you, you can't place the order. And the problem disappeared overnight. So it saved them a fortune.
So this is quite interesting. So obviously some of us haven't worked in big companies, or I haven't for at least 20 years.
Same.
And I'd imagine maybe a few of my listeners, all 100 of them, will not have worked in big companies, because obviously there's a lot more smaller companies now, and there's the startup thing where this would be like expected. So yeah. I think it's probably worth a little bit just explaining the scale of the problem in these big organizations, especially if you go back to what I would call modern tech.
It was an interesting time, because obviously we were talking about this newfangled thing that was 5 years old, called the internet. People were like, why would I want to use that? So back then there was no such thing as SaaS, cloud computing, and we were, I guess, one of the first companies to do it. We were always cloud-based.
Mm-hmm.
And
Before it was called cloud, right?
Well, it was called something else actually back then. It was called Just Ask Services for some reason back in the day. But our largest client, to give you some idea of the scale, Alistair, our largest client is an international bank. And for that client, we process around 100,000 bookings per month.
Wow.
Just for them.
Just for them.
Just for rooms as well. That is rooms and hospitality in the main. So, it's amazing. So companies couldn't function without a kind of decent booking engine. So we sold the company in 2011, and I actually had an ambition to try and create something slightly different to what we've been doing kind of for all that time. And I created a kind of a version of Booking.com for meeting rooms called Cloud Booking.
Yeah.
I ended up actually getting the original company back. The software was really old, but we kind of still had about 5 clients left. And the interesting thing was with the original, the old company, is that, as I say, we'd acquired this client base. We'd rolled our system out to their sites in such a way that it was kind of customized for each location. So the only person that really knew how it all worked was me. So quite a handy position.
Nice lock-in feature there. You want it changed? Just ask me. Yeah.
What do you do? Either I could send them a template Word doc and say, fill that in and I'll build your site for you. Or what we did, which was to kind of interview every location and say, what's unique about this building? What do we need to do for you to make it work really well? So it is a lock-in, no doubt about it. But it also meant that we created a system that actually worked really well at a site level. And I learned a valuable lesson from that. But what I also found is when our biggest client kind of merged with another big bank in 2008, what we found is that they and all our other clients were also spending tons of money on external meeting rooms with hotels and Regus centres and things like that. So I kind of wanted to try and marry those two things together. So I created Cloud Booking really in 2012 as a means of managing that overspill.
So this is, just to be clear, I am big corporate. I have obviously floors of meeting rooms because I do or did. We'll come on to the future of how it works in a bit. So I have a score of meeting rooms per location, whatever. They're always full because, you know, people are having lots of meetings. And then people are going out. And I guess what you're saying is where a smaller company might just go meet a Starbucks, they can't do that because it's a bank or whatever. So they're then going to a deal with Regus and saying, we want 4 of these meeting rooms today. And obviously, as we all know, short-term meeting room rental is not cheap.
It was a weird situation because what actually was happening is that the meeting rooms were just really badly used.
Okay.
Every client we've ever had, they have the same issues where people will book the room they like rather than the room they should use.
Yeah, which makes human nature. Yeah.
You know, they'll book for the meeting for 3 hours just in case, you know. Because people aren't sure how long a meeting would go on for, and that's all fine. You know, that's accepted behaviours.
Yeah.
But the average, the interesting stat for me, and the one that really stuck out more than anything, is that the average occupancy of all the rooms we managed was about 50% of their capacity. Now, if you've got a room for 6 and its average is 3 or 4, that's fine. When you have rooms of 20, you know, 25 or more, first of all, there aren't many of them. And if they're then badly used, if their average occupancy is 12 or 10, you know, then it's a knock-on effect that means the large groups that often would be kind of project teams would have to meet consistently, you know, and you can't have the project coordinator saying to the project director, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't get a meeting room. They're not free." I'm like, how is this my problem? You know?
This week it's Starbucks, next week it's Regus, and if we're lucky, we'll be in our own office.
Consistency, and what companies like Regus and hotels potentially offer is a consistent meeting room experience, you know, in the same place every week.
Okay.
So what we did is when I kind of took control of the business in 2013, so I kind of then became the sole owner. And I started again, you know, effectively. I started to rebuild the platform from scratch based on all these things that we learned over the years.
Yeah.
So what we've tried to do is work alongside other technologies. So kind of take an agnostic view of it to say we work with whoever we kind of think is the best or whoever the client's already got. And by that, I mean companies that manufacture sensors. Yeah. So a sensor would be something that either sits on the ceiling or under the desk and monitors the activity of that space, or in the case of a ceiling sensor, a bunch of spaces or a meeting room beneath it.
Quick question then. Are you the first person to actually identify that these meeting rooms were so badly utilised? Had anyone actually done this work?
I think we probably came out with the first actual booking engine. And I think, we were the first people to start advocating the use of sensor technology to actually show clients how space was being utilised.
Because it's expensive, right? If you've got 1,000 square feet of even a small room in London, I don't know what the price is for the old cliche trash can, you know, per square foot thing, but you are spending, you know, thousands across your property portfolio.
Yeah.
Never mind the money you then spend in Regus, right?
But that's exactly the point. You know, if you're spending all this money on real estate with rooms and desks, you know, a desk being, I don't know, say £5,000 per year per desk, you know, then it soon gets out of control. It really does. So, you know, for one client, it was a really interesting project actually. It was a local authority in London, and the challenge I got from them was, I don't want a product. I don't want a system to book things. I need somebody to listen to what I'm saying and help me build a solution that requires no effort from our users. Because my logic's always been, the less you have to interact with a service like ours, the more realistic and effective the data is that comes out of it. Because it's driven by behavior, you know, not because people will try and avoid using a new system, right? I mean, you know, I know guys up where I live who work at Rolls-Royce and Toyota, and the only bit of SAP they know how to use properly is the bit where they submit their expenses claim, because that's the bit that gets them paid, right?
I think that's pretty common across all companies.
Absolutely, and you know, like everything else is an alphanumeric character wherever they can get away with it.
Yeah.
So what we did is we put just as an experiment, RFID tags on the base of laptops of the users in the pilot, and RFID readers under the desks next to sensors. So all a person had to do to book a room or a desk was to sit down, with a laptop. And then we would go, oh, this is Alistair, right? So Alistair sat at desk 1. That's actually Jerry's desk. And we'd say to you, Alistair, that desk is busy, but there's a couple of your colleagues upstairs, sat at desk 25 and 26. Or you could just move to desk 3 if that's okay. And you go, oh, fair enough. Sit, put your laptop back on that desk. You're in. So what we also do is monitor the space. So if it's not used for a period of time, like, whatever the client tells us, 30 minutes, we can say, Alistair, it looks like you've been away from that desk for a while. Have you finished? And if you don't answer, after another 15 minutes, we'd free that space up for other people to use.
That's the end of the long lunch then.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Leave jacket. Let's assume.
People would always say to me, what if I just put my laptop down and go to the pub? What if you've got a job where you can do that, right? Good for you.
Good on you, yeah.
Well done. Isn't that a life goal?
Yeah.
But the reality is the sensor would say, there's a laptop here, because our sensors also pick up objects, not just people. They'll say there's 3 bags in this room, or something like that.
Wow.
So if the people
do you know why that's a bit Big Brother? Does that not have, there was that guy on the BBC yesterday who was taking screenshots of his staff. He was slated LinkedIn yesterday. You kind of everyone hates him for it. You can sort of empathize. He's got a control freak. He's got no control. Do you know, is there any pushback from these big clients, from their staff going, hold on a minute, I've actually brought my gym bag into the room? That feels a bit...
Well, no. The sensors to detect bags would only be in meeting rooms. So if people left the meeting room, went to lunch for 2 hours, and then came back, the system it wouldn't pick up a bag at a hot desk.
Okay.
There's no value in that. But it's an interesting question, right? Because there was an experience some years ago in one of the major newspapers where the owners of the paper decided to put sensors under the desks of all the seating positions of the journalists and not tell them.
Wow.
So you can imagine the rebellion that occurred when somebody, dropped their cigarette or something under the desk and saw it. So it's all about communication, right? Because these things aren't about tracking what people are doing. It doesn't say when you entered and left the building or any of that. It just says this space is vacant or it's busy. Mm-hmm. And if clients, like as they have to do now, want us to check staff in and out, we use things like QR codes. We have a QR code scanner built into the app. Each desk would have a QR code with the number of the desk on it. They just scan it.
This is the return of the QR code. I had this conversation. It must be 6 months ago, maybe a year ago. It was before lockdown, anyway. And I was saying to somebody, you should put this in print, right? Because you can just hold your camera over it and people go, that's bollocks, QR codes are dead. You're like, honestly, your camera just recognizes it. Because people who tried it think you have to have a special QR app and it doesn't work and you can't use it. And I saw some guy who's in print was telling me that soon you'll be able to do a specific image. Like if I take a screenshot of you now, I can actually turn that into a QR code because the camera will, that's really smart. So that's an obvious, really neat extension of it. So I'm coming into the building and I need a meeting. I presume I don't have to book 4 hours in advance. I could just literally go, I need to meet the 3 guys from product dev. We need to meet pretty like in an hour. And you just tell me where in the building that is. And you're optimizing it so I don't take up the boardroom with its 24 seats if somebody else needs, more people in that meeting. So is the system in the background optimizing all the time for these different meetings?
Well, the beauty of how we work is that we kind of ask our clients to tell us how they want the system to work for them. And then we build in those features, right? So the QR code thing came from a really large multinational mining customer. Said, look, we love all the other stuff you're doing, but add in a feature for QR codes.
Mm-hmm.
And the other tech that you mentioned there, we've got another client that's asked us to build in things like adding a Teams or a Zoom meeting to cloud booking.
Okay.
So when a user comes onto our app, they can book a meeting room and say, add a Teams link to this so other people can dial in.
Okay, that's good.
But the trick part is that they also want us to turn what is essentially a booking engine into a scheduling engine. So the user would say, this is my requirement. I've got 6 people coming. Some of them are senior, some of them aren't. I need a projector, so I've got to present some stuff. And then they don't actually choose the room that they're going to use. They're allocated a room close.
Yeah.
And what it means is that if the room isn't used, so let's say you get a thing, there's a bit of a phenomenon called ghost bookings. And it seems to be a legacy of, like when you've got a temp, coming to the end of their contract, they'll say, oh, you know what you can do before you leave is book all the meeting rooms out for the rest of time. just to annoy everybody. And that must be the reason they do it, because it seems that way. So if you have a no-show in a room, if you don't check in within 15 minutes, the booking is deleted.
Wow, so that gets rid of all that walking through corridors, wondering why all the rooms are empty, because somebody's I'm going to meet somebody from UX, and then they don't turn up because they've got an important meeting elsewhere.
Exactly. So, and if it happens a couple of times, then the whole sequence of meetings is deleted, because it's like, it's happened 3 times.
Oh, that's clever.
Bogus meeting.
So basically, you're getting scored for your. Technically, it's like if I keep booking meetings and not turning up, eventually somebody's going to say, "You can't book a meeting anymore, Jerry."
We did have a client many years ago that had a 3 strikes in your office policy.
That's great, though. Why not?
Yeah,
I mean, when I was doing a bit of consulting, I'd sit in these bigger companies and look at like a meeting. You'd be looking at a floor of 500 people in front of you, and then upstairs would be just a wall-to-wall, small to medium-sized meeting rooms, and you go up for a meeting and there'd be nobody in them, and you'd be thinking, who's supposed to be in there? And of course, I wonder if it reflects a bit more of. I mean, we'll come on to the COVID lockdown stuff in a second, but I wonder if it reflects pre-COVID culture of people saying, I want to have a meeting, and then I'm really sorry, I got to cancel, because you must see the cancel, because the cancellation. Do people cancel?
They don't cancel because it's not easy. So what you find is that, and it's, what, it's not the problem isn't really people not showing up. It's people finishing early and then leaving in the meeting and not cancelling or not curtailing the meeting that's in progress. So there's a tablet outside the meeting room. We supply those kind of things. That's red. That says, this is Alistair's meeting till 5 o'clock. It's 2 o'clock and your meeting finished after 30 minutes. But as I said, you book the room for the duration because you're not sure what it'll take. And you know what? It's not intentional. It's people do it, wander out of the meeting room chatting, about the next steps of the project they're on or whatever it might be, and forget.
I guess it's just not a thing, right? So if I'm in a meeting, 3 of us, it's 11 o'clock, we've got another hour to go, and we go, should we go and get a bite to eat? And you just get your stuff and go. You leave it there and you go.
Yeah.
And nobody's ever said to you, it would be helpful if you could think about the fact you're just leaving this very expensive piece of real estate empty for 2 hours.
But my view, Alistair, is that you can't do it like that, because, what you can't do is ask people to engage with another engine, another system, right? When their job isn't related to that solution. It's like my job isn't booking meeting rooms. I might be a project manager or an accountant. So I think the less we engage our users and require our users to interact with a service like us, the more effective it will be.
And this gets worse the more senior, right?
Well, that's the thing, right? So it's like a perennial debate. So the property guys and the property directors, the facilities teams say, we need more space. And the C-suite directors will say, well, you know what? Whenever I walk past your meeting room,
they're always empty.
The rooms are empty. So figure that out, and you won't have a problem anymore.
Yeah, but I bet you the same C-suite guys, phone their assistant and say, "Hi there, I'm going to be meeting Jerry at 3 o'clock. Can you book me in the boardroom because I'm going to have tea and biscuits and impress him?" And then this boardroom of 24 people is for you. And then you turn up and he goes, "Actually, it's 4 o'clock. Should just go for a pint." And then that whole room sits empty, wasted for 2 hours, which somebody else was desperate to want, but they buggered off to Regis and spent $1,000 on the 20-person meeting over there.
Yeah, absolutely, it happens. And I think the largest spend I've seen from any client is that they were spending, as well as us processing all these bookings for them, they were spending something like £14 million a year on external venues.
I just want to say that again, 14 million
on external.
On external.
Nobody talks about it, right? It's like a dirty secret. They don't want their staff to know how to book externally because they don't want them to do it. I'm like, but they do. So don't you want to control it and make it more efficient, and
also empower them, right? You want people to feel empowered that they're part of saving £14 million and doing things properly, because actually, that 14 million quid has an impact on your bonus or
they don't know. They don't know that's the amount being spent because nobody tells them. It's bizarre. Honestly, every company I've met bar one really manages it really badly, because you have the travel team that are responsible for all the external bookings, and the property or facilities team that are responsible for all the internal. And all they do is blame each other. Your system was better, we wouldn't have people booking outside. Give people a choice, right? So either I've got to stay in the office or I can go to a nice plush meeting room in the West End. I'll take that choice. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
I guess that's a pragmatic thing, isn't it? Because you can imagine once you've opened the door, so to speak, into the fact you can have the meeting elsewhere, and you've had a couple of external meetings, and you found that really good one, just a mile away, which has actually got better biscuits. I mean, pretty much. And,
Exactly, yeah.
And you're not in the office, right? So if your meeting's at 3 and at 4 o'clock it kind of finishes early, well,
that's why they do it, because then they can go home, right? So I think what we try and do is, as I said, is just automate this process. So we try and create a churn so that spaces are freed up, throughout the day. And of course now it's completely different,
Yeah, I was gonna say. So let's get to the elephant in the room. You've built a business, right, over 20 years.
Yeah.
Which is dependent on people having meetings, and now they're meeting like this. So did you see it coming in February? When March, were you thinking about this early March, or did you just go, oh shit, we have to react? And what have you done? That's what I'm really interested in.
I guess, we could see that something was coming, right? Yeah. I mean, I put a lockdown in place with all my team in early March because it was obvious, that this was getting worse. And I think that anyone that doesn't respond to any kind of crisis, any business owner that doesn't respond to it with a bit of innovation, right? Frankly, you get what you deserve.
You got to watch yourself. There'll be a few people on LinkedIn going, "That's not true, Ger. I'm just waiting for things to return to normal." My LinkedIn's full of people, and I have to say they're mostly our age, going, "Soon we should be back in the office, and my team will be there to listen to me, and I'll be able to see what they're doing." And I don't think they realise that. It's not so much even if the lockdowns are lifted, which, judging by today's news, isn't. It's the 30th of September, everyone. Today's news is going to get worse, right? Boris is on at 5 o'clock. But what they're missing is, I think, is their staff are going, hey, I don't mind coming in, but I'm just not coming in every day, because actually I've saved 8 hours a week commuting, and that was expensive and boring, and I never did like standing, with my face in somebody's armpit anyway. So I think there's our generation are struggling a little bit with what may be the case, that people will take a pay cut to live elsewhere. So anyway, interrupted. So you're going to innovate, and what did you do?
So what happened, obviously, the first couple of weeks was mayhem. Before the furlough scheme was announced, nobody really knew what was going to happen next. We were growing at a crazy pace anyway. So since 2017, we released a new system in 2017, and went from like 5 customers to 100.
And it's worth clarifying, you have some of the world's biggest and best companies as clients. I mean, we should maybe touch that at the beginning. I'll put it in the show notes. But, I mean, just run through for the audience some of your clients. I mean, they are fantastic.
So, it ranges right across industries. So Lloyds Bank, Airbus, Experian, Hitachi, most recently Lloyds of London, Get, the taxi guys as well. We've just won. Shop Direct, the
who's who of every SaaS company's desired customers, right? And you've got them. So, because they're also this, I did ask the question for a purpose, because these guys, you're going, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What does this lockdown look like? What does furlough look like? What's going to happen to my business? But your clients are going through, magnified a million times, because they're going, hold on a minute, I have 30,000 staff and all this office space. So you kind of had a double-sided innovation problem here, didn't you?
Well, we don't just book meeting rooms. Our system is actually a data-led building management solution.
Okay.
So what we're trying to do is to help companies to make their buildings become more efficient. And we were about that anyway. But I've been an evangelist for the last few years about that a shift was coming.
Okay.
In terms of the way that people were going to work in the future. Well, I didn't realize it was all going to kind of happen in the space of a couple of months.
2 weeks.
Right. I mean, we've had the world's largest ever work from home experiment, and it's been a huge success. Zoom and Teams usage has rocketed, and it's kind of worked out okay. And what we've had is, it's really interesting mix actually of challenges from clients. So a lot of our clients, because we operate internationally, we've got clients all over the world. So right now we've had a couple of clients that have placed orders in, and just to give you some indication of the growth, our client list has expanded by 50% since May. So
wow! During lockdown.
During lockdown. So what's happened is the office environment as we knew it was this kind of benign place, where if you went to work and you had a bit of a sniffle, people would say, you know what, maybe you should take a couple of days off. Don't infect your colleagues if you're getting the flu. I mean,
that was if you had a progressive boss.
Quite.
Not everyone was like that.
Well, so what's happened now, of course, is it's become an environment where if you don't take adequate steps to protect your staff, they could sue you. So clients have ranged from having things like, it's like in France, a lot of people are back at work.
Are they?
So a lot of big international companies would say, well, they said, our desks are a meter apart. So that's the regulation. So
back to work you go.
Back to work, yeah. So UK is different. The US is different too. And it varies from company to company. But what they're saying is that they want to they want to be able to. So some companies are saying, like, if you're in the blue team, 1 week you're at home, and if you're in the red team, the same week the blue team isn't in, you're in the office, and then you swap over, deep clean in between, and so on. Most companies are saying we only want people to come in twice a week, so our system is capable of only allowing you to book a desk up to a maximum number of times per week. We have things like, as I mentioned, QR codes. We've adapted our visitor system, so the visitor system now sends out a COVID questionnaire to any visitor that's booked in.
Wow.
So they're pre-screened. They're pre-screened again before they come, and they're pre-screened when they arrive at reception, to make sure that they've got no further symptoms.
So this makes sorry, a friend of mine works for an unnamed, rather large organisation, Canary Wharf, which has, let's just say, multi-thousand desks in the building. And he's one of 100 people allowed in, and he's only really in there because you're either allowed in there if you're hardware, cybersecurity, security, and there's just, I think the problem that you're solving there for them is they can't actually get everybody in and out at the right times to the right places because they can't manage the desk space, and also you've got to get the lift. And the biggest problem in Canary Wharf is these high volume, high speed lifts. You can't use them.
Yeah, quite. And the other challenge that we're getting a lot from clients is, like some of the bigger companies are talking about real estate reductions, permanent reductions of up to 60% of their current space. So wow. This isn't going away. The time for this solution is right now. So that's a really interesting time for us. And I've always been working on the basis of trying to build a solution that would just help people manage their day more effectively, so to be at the heart of their schedule. So when they get impacted by the tube going down, I don't want them to find out when they get to Bank Station that they can't get the central line across town. I want to know that that's happened, and I want to be able to fix it for them before they even leave their building.
So you're adding layers of value into the product, right? So I buy the product to manage my 3,000 people in London. I've got an issue now that I only want every second desk be filled, and I want everyone in the office at some point during the week. So that's all fixed, really. But you're going a step further and saying, listen, as you're walking down to the tube or the train, wherever you get it, you're going to alert and say, look, so take my line, for example, Grantham to King's Cross, it's off because somebody's jumped in front of a train or whatever. You're not going anywhere for 2 hours. Yeah. And actually then I go, fair enough, I'll work from home, and your system can allocate the desk to somebody else, etc. And you're getting right ahead of the curve in terms of...
It can allocate the desk to somebody else, but it can also give you the option to then turn the meetings that you've got into video conference calls.
Wow.
If everybody else is in the building ready to go with that meeting, the worst thing to happen is that you then have to cancel it because all those other people have made it in.
So you've told me in advance, I get back home, I switch on Zoom, boom, we have meeting. So you've got business continuity, efficiency, real staff benefit because I'm not wasting 2 hours stressing about getting there, all that kind of thing.
But also what we do is we make sure that people that have traveled haven't traveled in vain. Because what you don't want to do, right? You get to the office, you kind of made that decision, to venture out. You've made it to the office, and now the meeting's been cancelled. That's the worst of all worlds. Yeah. So what we'd rather do is not wait till you're on your way to the station, but tell you before you leave. It could even be that you've set an alert to say if the train's crowded, if the station's crowded, let me know. I don't really want to travel when there's lots of people. So we might just send you a recommendation, say, look, you've asked us to let you know this, so we're suggesting that you don't go in. There's a bunch of people there already, and we can tell you where they're sat, remember, because we've got our sensors.
Yeah.
So we can then say, we're moving the meeting that was in room 2 to meeting room 15, which has got video conferencing facilities. So everybody else can meet in person. What we're then going to do is add a Teams or a Zoom meeting link to it, so you can dial in, but at least you're still there. That's the key. And all those other guys can then mingle at a distance as appropriate.
Mingle at a distance.
You get the idea.
It's hard, isn't it? It's so hard. So that obviously gives you insight. There's a couple of things. One thing you said was really interesting. So based on my LinkedIn feed and the people who are waiting to go back to the office, they're all sort of, the guys who do that tend to be more small to mid-sized companies. You're saying what you're actually hearing from the biggest companies in the world is that they're looking at 50% upwards office space reduction permanently. So they have accepted and are planning for working from home being at least part-time being a viable option. What they're saying is, they, in all honesty, a lot of them are saying to us, we need your help to tell us how to fix this problem that we have. Because what you've then, of course, you've got to factor in is that I've got my own office at home, and at Cloud Booking, all our staff work from home. We've got 60 people, all of them are home-based. We have an office in central London that no one's been to since early March. So we're all geared up for it, and we've got a great culture that revolves around interactions like this one. Yeah. But not everybody's that fortunate, and particularly younger people. So it's hard to get on the property ladder, right? And you've got people who are living in house shares and flat shares. And I don't, to me, the idea of a call center operative for a financial services company or an insurance company trying to take me through security around the kitchen table with all their housemates is farcical, right? It must be happening, though. Of course, it has to happen, and that's the thing. And I think these companies are saying we need some other way to do this. So we're working on other options at the moment as well for how we can solve that problem with our clients and partners. And interestingly, you said you got this really good culture. So I did a bit of work. I ran this little Friday night TV thing for another company, which was good fun, But the audience went from everyone pretty fast to half the company, and pretty fast to the 6 people that really I would have been friends with at the company anyway and drinking beer with. So how are you as a CEO? Like, how do you speak to every individually every month? I mean, how are you driving that culture? And what do you do that keeps people engaged? Because really, I mean, it is really, really, everyone's fed up of bingo and quizzes, right? Oh, absolutely. I mean, we had a weekly coffee morning that for the first 2 or 3, everybody showed up, and we sent them all their Cloud Booking mug, so they could all kind of join in and feel part of it. But, it was like doing quizzes with your family on a Sunday. that became really tiresome. Really that quick. Boxing Day feeling like, right, it's done. Can I go now? Exactly right. Exactly. But the thing is, it didn't. What we had to do, I guess, is to offer each other reassurance in the early days, especially people who had to shield or were more impacted than others. Yeah. Because it was a frightening time for everybody, But let's remember, we were already doing this. There was no impact to us. We already had a work from home culture, and it's really funny, right? Because we've used Teams for years, and what we found now is that there's kind of like a snobbery thing that's come in, where people will write a long Teams message, and people will fire back to say, actually, I think that probably should have been an email. I'm not quite sure how they make that distinction, but there appears to be etiquette around all of this stuff. Yeah. And I encourage the use of video, and there's 2 reasons for that. I think even though the video experience is, me looking you in the eye now means I'm actually looking at a green dot at the top of the screen. But I think it's important for people to be able to read each other's body language. Yeah, definitely. I'll talk more about that in a sec, because that's a really interesting challenge. But I think it also stops people from doing other things, right? When you hear the silence when you ask a question, that person wasn't listening to you. Yeah. It's much harder to kind of do that when you're engaging like this. Isn't that when you just pretend, oh, sorry, I was on mute, just to give your brain time to catch up? Isn't that the phrase of lockdown? I think you're on mute. Can everybody see my screen? I'm on mute for a reason, so I can play Call of Duty over here and then jump back on your question when you answer. Because that face-to-face thing is really. A friend of mine said it's exhausting. Like this eyeball thing that we're doing right now. It's hard, It's a better way. And if you're junior, and here comes Jerry Brennan, the CEO, right? He's eyeballing you, saying you're doing really well, right? What are we going to do next week? You wouldn't do that in a face-to-face, right? You'd kind of be in the meeting room and you'd look up and think, hey, we're doing really well, and there's these things, and I'll do this bit of whiteboard, and you do it, and you wouldn't be going like eyeballing them directly, like some kind of, I can't think of a good analogy that I can actually repeat on radio there.
But I think you do end up, though. You do end up initially when you start doing this stuff. You kind of are trying to fix your focus on the camera all the time, like some kind of rookie reporter.
Yeah.
But gradually, you just kind of relax into it. It becomes easier. But the thing is, for us, what I talked about body language a minute ago, and the nuances. So we get together. We have a monthly company-wide call where each of the departments talks about what they've been doing and what they've been working on. We have sprint reviews every Wednesday, so everybody gets invited to those, so we can all see the
everyone, even if it's not everyone. Okay, so they can listen to people who are planning this stuff. Yeah. So they're all involved, and then our dev teams, our respective sprint teams, will present the results of their endeavors, over the last fortnight, which is fantastic. Oh, that's pretty good.
Keeps everybody engaged. But the interesting thing is when we meet once a year, and that's something that we put on as a business for everybody. Last year we went to the Jaguar Land Rover plant in Solihull and did off-road driving on the original Land Rover course.
Wow.
We had a murder mystery in the evening, which apparently they don't do in America because our American staff thought there genuinely had been a crime committed and that they were being questioned. So that was quite entertaining.
Afraid don't do it in case somebody pulls a gun and shoots the host, right?
Right. I mean, then it could have been serious. Yeah. But like, with my Irish heritage, there's obviously a lot of drinking involved as well, right? And we let our hair down, And what's really interesting is that if you didn't have that whole video thing, you hear the voice of the person that you've spoken to for the last 12 months, but you're not used to the face and the body language and the expressions, and all that kind of stuff. And you're thinking, I didn't think they'd be like that. And we that's part of why we do the video thing too, But I think our culture is, and I've always been a great believer that everybody has to be invested in the company, So we have a share option scheme that everybody's part of after your probationary period. So I hope that everybody feels a sense of collective endeavor and shared ownership of this, and it's never going to be the same thing, right? I mean, you know what it's like, entrepreneurs, we all work 25 hours a day. We have no life,
Wait, we do? No, you're completely wrong there. Sorry. We do have life. It's, not that I'm actually doing any entrepreneurial stuff right now, but it's called work life. It just merges into one. I've had this theory for years, for 20 years. People say, my work-life balance. Like, if you want to leave, set up your own thing, right? You don't have a work-life balance. And I think that's the hardest thing, people who leave a job to set up on their own, which about 1 million people are about to start trying doing this soon, I think.
Yes.
Is that you just don't have it, right? If you're sitting in the evening, you sit there and you might answer some questions, you might bring your laptop and do some research, or whatever. You might just work for like 3 days flat with 6 hours sleep. Yeah. And then and I think that whole thing is a real, that's the hardest piece for anyone start. I always say to the young kids I help at Nottingham Uni, like, just don't see it as like, okay, it's this time I stop now. Now is when I play Dungeons and Dragons or whatever it is you do, You're
showing your age there.
Yeah, well, not that I've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, obviously. Far too cool. But I think that work-life balance, and I think as a CEO, if you've managed to bring that in, so because you were obviously right up here, you're Mr. I have work-life all one merged up thing that isn't separated, but your staff don't. You pay them. Some of them will say, "I've done my day." Some people will always give you a bit more, but they can't give you a bit more week after week after week after week. Otherwise, they just start going, I'm just exhausted, because there's a mental switch between where you are and where they are.
I think your challenge as a leader, though, is to give people a clear steer on what it is you're trying to do, and try and create momentum when it's needed, but also reward people and acknowledge people that have done things that have gone above and beyond.
Yeah,
and you're right. There are different groups. Every company's got. I always kind of refer to the key people as the pillars. The people that are always there will do whatever you need. And I'm blessed. I'm really lucky. I've got loads of those. People that you could call on and you could count on. But I think the most important thing that we do is we try and create a genuinely flexible culture. So I say to people, I don't care what time you start. It doesn't matter to me how you work. I'm not interested in any of that. All I care about is output.
And has that been your philosophy for years? So that you've got people who actually, instead of everyone's being told this now, they're going, I don't believe you. But you've been doing this for years.
Yeah. So the reason I started working from home, other than when we started, we had no money, is that I wanted to be here to watch my kids grow up, and be around. And my own dad had to go and get a job in London when I was quite young, and he'd come on weekends, but he'd be tired, and it was a big thing for me to be around. And I kind of thought, let's see how far we can take this. And obviously, as the technology improved, it became easier. So one of the key members, one of my pillars, one of the key members of my team said to me a couple of years ago, working at Cloud Bookings made me a better dad, and I'm really proud of that warmed my heart, let me tell you. Because what Chris does is he walks his kids to school in the morning and then goes and picks them up. Nothing gets in the way of that unless there's absolutely no choice.
So you're way ahead of a lot of CEOs, especially in the small, medium-sized companies, right? Because they're the ones who want the presenteeism and stuff because they haven't. I don't think it's so much trust. I think some of the ones I've spoken to, not on here, by the way, in case anybody's thinking that. Some of the ones I've spoken to, I think it's not so much trust as I just don't know how to measure it, right? Because I don't actually just letting people go. I mean, when I ran Company Check, we didn't even count holidays. I mean, I had no idea how many. I didn't even say this is a free holiday zone. Take what you need. It just didn't get counted. And people say, "Do you mind if I go off for 2 weeks?" Yeah, whatever. As long as somebody's got your back, right? Yeah. And I wish I had actually measured it because you probably find people took less.
I think it's true, and what I've like recently, we're working right now on a re-architecture of the system. So I took that decision quite early on in lockdown to think, right, well, there's not many people using the system at the moment, so let's take the chance to just re-engineer it, and make it faster and make it better and all of that. So my pact, if you like, with my dev team is, look, I need you guys to really go for it, over the next few months, and let's try and nail this. Obviously with things that have developed in the UK, it's less of a deal here because of course we're probably not going to see a mass return to work until March, but that's only in the UK. So what I've said to the guys is, I want to add some vacation time for you for next year. So take long weekends if you can. Try and avoid like 2 weeks somewhere, but take longer weekends, take a week, whatever. But then when you're done, let's stagger it so you all get more holiday when we're finished. And that's kind of a reward for those guys for that commitment. But I think the whole idea of saying to people, I'm not going to check on you. No one's going to check on what you're doing, right? What you then have is a kind of peer thing. So they all actually, the guys will know if somebody's not pulling their weight. We don't really have a problem with that. I think it's there's so much collaboration goes on like in any dev company, any tech business, that if you're not doing your thing, people will tell you, and I don't have to tell them. I don't even have to know. They do it with each other, and it really works well. And it's like I was saying to somebody yesterday that you kind of have that period where you're at school where it's regimented. You'll be in by a certain time. You can't leave. You have an hour for lunch, and you have a couple of years at university where you let your hair down and go crazy. And you're responsible for your own deadlines, and on the whole, most people do okay, right? And then you go back to the school environment when you get to work. Yeah. And I just don't get it. I've never subscribed to that. That's one of the main reasons why I work for myself.
Yeah. It's like I wonder if we actually asked everyone who is like us to that question. The biggest shock is leaving uni, to be fair, I was shit at as well. And then you get into it. I mean, mine was in, was it? Oh no, it was a print company. God help me. And it was like, the hours were 9 to 5, right? So fair enough, because all I want to do is go to the pub. And but of course, everyone was in at 8. You're like, what's everybody doing at 8? Well, that's what everybody does: get in early, get your desk clear. And I was like, well, not really. I'm hungover, and I was a total child at that age, and but it just taught me that the last thing I want is somebody saying this is when you work, and here's a really boring, mundane job, by the way, but it's such a boring, mundane, but yet exciting job that you should be in at 8 o'clock to get ready for the £21,000 a year we're going to pay you, and you're like, this doesn't make any. And I think I look at the kids now and I think, the opportunities they've got are fantastic, aren't they? I mean, if people like you setting a standard of what a CEO should do and how they should act, and understand it's not presenteeism, but it's actually output, and in a way that your peers will call it out, but may also support you. Yeah. Right? I think there's other podcasters with bigger audiences that you should find these hosts of and speak to, because there are people who are focusing on this. Is like, how do I do this? And you've been doing it for over a decade.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, and as I say, our growth, a lot of our growth has come in the last 3 or 4 years. As I said, and that's when we've added all these people. We've still considered, can we keep this going? And actually, we can. There's no doubt about it. I think it's
how many people are there?
60.
Wow. So this is not inconsequential number of people to only ever see on video.
It's interesting because then it kind of forms part of your recruitment, your hiring strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing you have to look for in personnel, and it's difficult to gauge, right? But you have to find people who are self-starters, who are happy in their own company, and that always means people who are very strong-willed, and very confident. So what you actually have in this company is probably 60 people who are all not afraid to voice their opinion, and that's great. I love it. It's great. And it creates some interesting debates, but everybody understands what we're trying to do. Everybody understands the end objectives and what we're trying to do as a company, and everybody signed up to it, and that's why our staff retention rate is huge. We very rarely lose people, and our client retention rate is the same because we have the same level of honesty and type of relationship with our clients. We went through a process with one of the world's largest real estate companies, and they were assessing all the companies in our sector, and they came back and gave us some feedback and said, we heard some customers would say, look, it wasn't all plain sailing. Nobody gets it right all the time, but these guys never walked away. They never let us down. And they kept at it until the system was embedded and was fixed and working.
There's probably a LinkedIn course in there, isn't there? Jerry's Guide to how to remote manage your business.
Well, I've seen one company in the States. I can't remember the name. I read about it last year that have got up to 750 people. I think that's mightily impressive. 10 times the number and more. But what they do is they get together once a quarter in some kind of auditorium, which is kind of the American style, right? Where the CEO stands up and gives them all the big whoop. That's not really my thing, but I'll certainly stand at the bar and buy them all a beer, and have a chat.
You'd love the big whoop. You just don't.
That's not my bag, I promise you.
So let's finish up with where you're going. So you've got all these. I love the fact every time you mention a customer, you say, obviously because you're not saying names, you're saying the world's biggest. Every time you've mentioned one, you've gone the world's biggest. The world is fabulous. It's so exciting. So you've got the world's biggest customers. Yeah. You've got this great team. You've re-architected. So you've managed to turn the pandemic into an opportunity. You're helping the clients. And obviously, there's a period of massive growth going on. So where is cloud booking going over the next couple of years?
So I think it's probably not my place to name all the clients. Some of them are happy to. Not all of them are. So you know what it's like.
Yeah.
But I think it's been a really tough time for everybody. But what we have more than anything is a sense of, and I know this sounds really corny, but it's true. It's a sense of family. So my wife works in the company. My eldest daughter's just joined us as a project manager straight out of uni, and we have a lot of couples that work for the company, like the husband is a BA, the wife is a technical tester, for example. And we generally do actually have a couple that do that. Yeah. One design, one project management and so on. And I think there's a lot of kind of unity and spirit in that.
Yeah.
But in terms of how we grow, there's a bunch of stuff that we've got coming up. I mean, our next move is going to be to raise some additional capital to replicate a part of what we've got in the US. We've tried to hire US staff and manage them from the UK, and it just doesn't work. It's too big, and over half our inquiries and our new orders are coming from the States now. So we need a presence there, and that'll be the next step, is to replicate cloud booking in Europe in the US. The other project we're working on is to try and blur this, to do what I was trying to do in 2012, which is to blur this distinction between internal space and external space, and give people a platform that allows them to work flexibly from the location that suits them best. Mm-hmm. And that's interesting, and that's a challenge that we're rising to. And I think that's the way the world was always going to go, and it's just that it's been accelerated. And some of the ideas, some of the things we're coming out with in the next few months will fix that.
I guess it kind of was. I mean, I think I've not got this wrong. It kind of was in the way that people were just sort of landing in Starbucks and having a meeting, on the way to somewhere. And they kind of were doing it unofficially.
Well, Starbucks saw that trend. So Starbucks actually created an Outlook add-in some years ago.
Did they really?
It did, yeah, about 10 years ago.
Wow.
And relaunched it a year or two ago with Microsoft to say, you know, I'm meeting a pal. This is the nearest Starbucks. Let's meet there. You know, it was bizarre. But if you look at the way that Starbucks kind of repurposed their restaurants, I guess you call them, is that they're set up for hot desking. You know, they've got free Wi-Fi. They've got the kind of USB power supply points, you know, plugs, little lamps that sit over the desks.
Very expensive coffee.
But what they can't do is they can't stop the general public using them. You know, people coming, the kids coming in from school, the meeting up. You know, something quite. You know, that's how it should be. But I want to create something that cuts away that problem, but gives people the same ubiquitous
a professional environment where you're not going to have somebody coming in and, you know, sitting and going, all right, mate, pass the sugar.
Yeah. And you don't have to take all your stuff with you whenever you need to go to the toilet from all that.
And also what you're trying to achieve there will actually solve another problem for independent cafes, because as we all know, the city centres are being a bit hollowed out right now, and local towns like the ones probably near you and me are much busier in the centre. And the cafe owner there said the best thing about people working at home was he didn't have office workers coming to his cafe, spending £2.50 in a cappuccino and 2 hours at a table. He's got half the tables because of his distancing. He's making more money.
Yeah, and that's the trick. And those are the kind of people that we want to reach out to and connect with, you know, and try and solve this with them.
Yeah, because you can actually say we will have professional people who will do this. Of course, he might actually not want people with a laptop and spending $2.50 in a coffee to come back, but they need somewhere else to go, right? Because actually, there's probably fewer cafe tables.
As well as the people that are house sharing, you know, you've got professional people that like my wife and I'm often having to go into the dining room or a kitchen, you know, or Claire has to do that to make a call because we sit opposite each other in an office. You know, we're on calls all day. So we just, luckily, you know, this particular call meant I could sit in the office. The one I had yesterday, I had to go in the dining room for, you know. And so if I had a place, if I had a design of area that I could use consistently wherever I end up, that'd kind of be my holy grail, you know. And that's what I'm trying to do.
And integrated into the cloud booking platform and available to everyone who's on it.
Exactly right.
Yeah, that's pretty sexy.
Yeah.
Well, it has been a fantastic journey through cloud booking, and thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks, Alistair. Good to see you.